So, oh, I did something bad. Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for stay with me and welcome Danny Cohen for Cohen Legal Group of Florida. So, thank you so much for accept my invitation to be with us today.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
Okay. I know that a lot of realtors may be calling you regards of these changes that are coming on November the 1st on the as-is residential contract. And I try to read and I try to go to the Florida realtors, and they are very vague, like nothing in specific of or about what is going on and how that can affect the sellers, the buyers, and us, the realtor. We are not an attorney, and we have to fill the blanks on the contract. So,
Correct.
as any contract, I think the most important for us is understand that area specific that goes with the time. And for what I understand, time is very important in this contract.
That's correct.
So go for let's begin for one of the most important, that is anything that is related to the loan, between the loan application, the loan approval, and what it's included now as a loan approval also.
That's correct. So they've incorporated the appraisal into the loan approval.
Oh Jesus, no, 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 no.
So no problem. So the prior contract allowed for separate contingencies for appraisal versus loan approval. And so what was happening is after buyers were being approved for their mortgage and delivering the notice of loan approval, they would sometimes still come back and say, oh, the property didn't appraise, or one of the repair items required in the appraisal hasn't been, made satisfactory, and then the buyer would be able to cancel the loan. And the legal hotline was really getting a lot of phone calls with situations like this. So they tried to clean it up here and roll all of that into the loan approval to hopefully alleviate some of these situations that come up between buyers and sellers. Okay. So basically what this means is that until the appraisal is completely satisfied, there cannot be loan approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we have up to 30 days, or when we don't fill the blanks, it said 30 days. And
Right.
after the COVID, or during the COVID, during the fact that the appraisal were so overwhelmed with all the loans that become and people that were looking to buy, we begin to do a lot at around 45 days.
Correct.
So, and I understand that being in a seller market, for a seller, when we put 45 days, it's like, whoa, I will have my house like outside, like out of the market for 45 days. So if the lender, not, let's see, appraisal, it's a point of discussion right now, because not too many seller wants the property be subject to appraisal. So
Right.
how this loan with the appraisal, always the lender have to manage that with the buyer, and buyer have to have more money and anything, will be the 30 days that we put contingency to receive the appraisal.
Yes. So what I would recommend is you do exactly that. Okay. When it's your buyer, if you can get 30 days or more, great. And just because the contract changed the standard template language, you can still add these clauses into paragraph 20 of the additional terms and create an appraisal contingency. So really nothing has changed in what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. It's more so they just change the form. If you leave it blank, then things are changing. So from the agents that I've been coaching, I still think it's a good idea, if you can, to insert that appraisal contingency, to give your buyer as many opportunities to get their deposit back as you can. And then on the opposite side, when it's your listing, you want to do exactly the opposite and try and tighten it up, have that deposit become secure as quick as possible for the benefit of your seller.
Okay. Obviously make the time, if it's appraisal, come and get out, open the door for the buyer to don't get tied in a contract that they can afford at the end.
That's correct.
Okay. So also they took out some words about, they put more simple, like if it's cash, period.
That's correct. Yes. And I can explain that quickly. Before, the first option, paragraph 8A, said that there's just simply no finance contingency. The buyer could still take a loan if they wanted to without the contingency. And so what we've seen happen is a lot of people were checking that box just to make the contract offer seem a lot stronger. But really, there was a finance, I shouldn't say contingency, but a finance rider or something, that needed to happen. The buyer didn't really have the cash in their bank. Maybe they had to sell a different property, refinance something else. And a lot of those events weren't happening, and then the buyer couldn't close on time. And so that led to a lot of arguments and phone calls to the hotline. So the Board of Realtors and the Florida Bar decided to kind of clean that up a little bit and say, just don't check it unless this is like really cash and the money's in your account. Don't do it, Let's see. I don't know if it's really going to achieve anything.
But yeah, I have one of that. One of my last closings, they put like they have the cash, and then he began to do a hard loan on the house,
right?
And do an appraisal, and I was like, I don't understand what are you doing. You said it was cash. We said it will be cash. Like, yeah, it will be cash at the end, but it took me like 3 weeks, and the seller was very agreed with the extension, but it was like an open the air, like it was cash, no cash. You are doing a hard loan, which is not a normal loan, and it was a little confused. So when it's cash now, it's cash. So
correct,
no contingency. Awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
And extensions on the approval. Now it's 7 days.
Yes. Okay. So before it was 10 days. Now they've reduced it to 7 days. But this is a really limited scenario for when that paragraph gets called into play. It was first implemented in 2015 when they changed they really changed the mortgage rules all around, where they required this new closing disclosure to be acknowledged 3 days prior to the closing. The fear at that point was what happens if it doesn't get acknowledged by the buyer 3 days before closing and the seller doesn't agree to extend. So they decided to force this automatic extension for up to 10 days. But unfortunately, what was happening, a lot of lenders and buyers were trying to use that paragraph to their benefit, to say, oh, well, we're not approved yet, but you have to extend the contract by 10 days. So it was never meant to give you more time to get the loan approved. This was an automatic extension for a very specific situation, in which the loan is approved, everything's ready to go, except that we cannot close on time because those 3 days have not been met. The 72-hour TRID rule, TRID they call it. So they've kind of tightened up this clause, this paragraph here, to say underwriting must be approved, loan must be fully approved, but if the exclusive reason for not being able to close on time is because these 72 hours have not been met, then we're going to call for an automatic extension. Before it was 10 days, now it's 7 days. And the reason I'm saying 3 days is because the law allows for the closing to be 3 days later from reviewing the closing statement if it's sent by email. Okay. 7 days is if it's sent by postal mail. So, I mean, I've since they started this, I've never heard of any lender sending a
Yeah.
CD by postal service. It's pretty much
Yeah.
all email. But anyway, that's what the law is. 3 days for email, 7 days for postal mail. So there really was no reason for it to ever have been 10 days. So
Yes.
they just cleaned that up, 10 down to 7. Yeah.
Awesome. And also for the delivery, I hear that before it was like acceptable to send by text, and now it's by fax or email or physical given to the person, the contract or any documents that have to be with the purchase.
Right. So when these contracts were initially drafted, text messaging wasn't as popular as it is today. I mean, a huge percentage of real estate, business takes over through text messages, with how busy everyone is. So, a lot of agents were then taking screenshots, sending it to the legal hotline saying, is this binding here? The agent agreed to this, but so they've kind of wanted to take text messages out of anything, say, don't rely on it. If you don't have it signed by the seller or at least at a minimum an email, don't give any weight to the text message.
Yeah. Yeah, there can be a conflict with millennials. And
Yeah.
I have a lot
Sure,
of
Jackie.
customers that come from text messaging, like they believe and we can read that. But yeah, I agree. At least emails give you more accuracy of what you are
Yes,
doing.
absolutely.
Okay. So another change is the assessments. What we consider that the seller have to pay if it's an assessment for homeowners association or it's an assessment by the city. So we usually try to if you are representing the buyer, the seller pay off before, but sometimes this assessment cannot pay off. We have to be paid at the time it comes due.
Right. So the scenario for that would be, let's say the condo building is going to get new elevators, and they assess each unit maybe $10,000. So they'll say, not everybody has $10,000 lying around. So we'll say, it's going to be an extra payment of $200 per month for the next 5 years. Okay. And depending on how they pass it, they may say that at the point of sale, it needs to be paid in full. A lot of condo associations are doing that. They're saying if you sell the property, it's got to be paid off. We're not going to allow the buyer to continue making these monthly payments. And, this really should be specified in the contract. Okay. It's got to be specified, obviously, that there is the special assessment and that if it needs to be paid in full, because failure to disclose that gives the buyer the power to push it onto the seller.
Okay.
Yeah. Really important stuff.
Yeah, that is something that we realtors get sometimes confused, and when we talk, and every part has their own position. So glad that now that it's more specific. I help both sides to know what they are signing.
Right.
So another thing that took my attention is the closing costs. They add short-term rentals and FIRTA, which I love.
Yes.
So now it's getting more specific if the property is rent, if it's a short-term rental, and if it's a loan, to provide the documents and also the property management.
Yeah. So all these things should be disclosed. And again, before this was visited, Airbnb and all these short-term rental sites really weren't that busy. But now with the popularity of them, it's becoming more and more prevalent. And some sellers and listing agents were trying to get a little savvy, saying, well, we didn't need to disclose that to you because it only requires us to disclose an actual, tenant with a lease. And this is more of a short-term rental, which led to a lot of calls to the hotline as well. So now they've tightened that up to include these short-term rentals needing to be disclosed to the new buyer.
So the buyer can now decide if they want to continue with the property management and not be tied with the future rentals.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I have I work with a lot of short-term rentals, and sometimes it's that the property comes tied with the property management.
Right. If there's a contract, for it, it can get a little complicated.
Okay. We have to talk more about that. Because I like FIRTA and I love the short-term rentals also. And with the FIRTA and that closing, so if the property, which is not too much right now, it's under 300,000, and that it's come up more specific to disclose, the seller have to do the withholding, or will be a withholding because will be a primary resident,
Right.
or it involve more the seller to, I have to pay this, or I have to get my accountant involved in the FERTA.
So what they addressed in the contract here was who's responsible to pay for the costs associated with getting these documents for FERPTA ready. Okay. So just for anyone who's unfamiliar, FERPTA is the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act. And so the IRS has had a fear that foreign investors were not going to pay their income tax, because once they sell the property, we have no control over these people. They don't live here. They don't work here. So they enacted this act to say, okay, these taxes need to be paid at closing through an escrow reserve. And they put the responsibility on the buyer. Now, usually the buyer will delegate that responsibility to their attorney or their title company, because realistically, they don't know anything about this. Okay. But ultimately, the responsibility does fall on the buyer. And that responsibility is that you have to make sure the seller is paying any taxes owed at the closing. And if they don't, the IRS has the authority to come to the buyer and say, you are now responsible to pay it. Okay. So it's really, really important that it gets done. Now, because they put that responsibility on the buyer, some sellers were saying, well, I don't care to have these FERPTA documents done, right? I'll cooperate and I'll sign them if the buyer wants to hire an accountant to prepare them, but I'm not going to pay for them. It's the buyer's responsibility. Now, that's really a ridiculous argument, because these are documents with the seller's name, with the seller's tax ID number, and it's ultimately for the benefit of the seller, because they're going to have to file a return at the end of the year. But nonetheless, some of these sellers were saying, well, if you want to buy the property, you need to pay the fee that the CPA is charging, maybe $1,500 or so. So this led to a lot of arguments and calls to the legal hotline. So they've cleaned this up now to say that the seller is responsible to pay for these fees associated with the preparation of these FERPTA tax documents. Okay. It was interesting to me to see it too, because I've never, I've probably done well over 200 or 300 FERPTA transactions. I've never seen a seller say they don't want to pay the $1,200 or whatever it is, but apparently it's happened, and happened often enough for them to actually make a change to the contract. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that sometimes sellers doesn't understand what FIRTA means, and after they change the percentage and the way they have to be put on the contract, sometimes they don't want to, and when they say, well, I have to pay 15%, that's and
Yeah.
I never use it. I never have any income. It was my second home. It was my family vacation place. So it got a little confused, and then many people try to put that as a primary residence. So I really like to see in the FIRCA, because it gets clear, for us also to understand what are the obligations for when they buy, and obviously when they a foreigner sell. And we have a lot of where we live from foreigner investments. So as clear as it can be, it's better for business. So I like it.
Correct. Agreed 100%, Jackie.
So, what else? What else? What else? Oh, the days. So now the calendar days, and it's no more 5 p.m. When we have to, when the closing or the time for inspection gets into a weekend or a holiday.
Right. So all deadlines are going to be at midnight, 11:59 p.m. Okay. So it used to be if the deadline fell on a weekend or a holiday, it would move to the next business day at 5 p.m., which confused some realtors because now you have some deadlines at 5 p.m., some deadlines at midnight. So they've taken away this 5 p.m. rule and just said across the board everything is going to be at midnight. The day will still extend, right? So a deadline can never end on a weekend or a holiday, except for offer and acceptance of the contract,
Okay.
right? So if you submit an offer on Christmas Eve and you give a 1-day period for the opportunity for the seller to respond, that deadline is absolutely firm. It will be on Christmas Day. That's the only deadline that
Okay.
sticks with the calendar days. Everything else would move to the next business day.
Okay. And it's the time where the property is located, not
Yes.
the
Okay.
time where the buyer is or the seller is or the country or whatever.
Yeah. And that's really a South Florida imposed rule because we deal with so many foreign investors and a lot of people from out of state and things like that. There was always arguments. Well, I'm over here, 3 hours here, 4 hours here. I'm overseas. The deadline applies to where I am. Well, they've cleaned that up to say, no, it's where the property is. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And also now we have a mall disclosure and pace for the green additions that we are seeing more in homes, windows and roof, solar, anything that makes the house green and better.
Yeah. So these PACE programs, okay. I personally am not a big fan of them. Really, all they are is just high interest loans. There's not, your people. You need to have the equity available.
Sorry.
You have some guests.
So, please.
It's okay.
That's the problem when you have a dog and working from home.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I may have children run in, so you never know.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry.
where was it? PACE. Okay.
Pace.
So in order to qualify for these PACE loans, you need to have the equity in your home. Okay. And if you have the equity, you're better off just taking an equity line of credit. The interest rate will be far, far lower. But anyway, these PACE loans, Green Corridor, Y Green, etc., they'll let you borrow the money for home improvement. Okay? And the bill, the repayment will be built into the property tax bill. So for some people, they like that idea. Maybe it seems like they're not really paying it back, but they are. It's in the tax bill and it's a high interest rate. Some of them I've seen as high as 11%. Okay. And one of the things that they say is that it is assumable, right? So you can, let's say, put a new roof, $40,000 Y green lien. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid at closing. The buyer can assume it. Okay. But the buyer has to agree, but there's nothing new here. Any lien can be assumed. You know what I mean? So there's nothing new here. So this whole marketing campaign of these loans being assumed by the buyer, they didn't introduce anything. Okay. And further, if there is a Y green lien and the new buyer, let's say the buyer does agree, okay, I do want to assume it, no problem. We've negotiated this into the price. If that buyer is taking a mortgage, the lender's not going to accept this because the Y green lien is going to have priority over the new mortgage. Okay, so all new mortgages usually want to be first in position. Okay. And so then the next question is, will Y Green agree to do what's called subordinate? So subordinate would be a scenario where someone has a superior lien, okay, and then a new lien comes in afterwards, but the prior one would sign a document agreeing to take a back seat, saying, I know I was recorded first, but I'm going to now step behind this new lien, okay? Well, Y Green has specifically said, we're not doing that. So, they're promoting this assumability thing, yet they're not agreeing to subordinate. They're saying, no, it needs to be paid in full, and then they can take a new one. It's just confusing. And I've dealt with this many times because sellers assume that the buyer's just going to pay it, that it didn't need to get paid off at closing, and then the buyer says no. Not a big fan of it. And it's led to a lot of arguments again. So they've now tightened this up, saying, "Hey, if you got it, make sure you disclose it. Don't wait till the last second. Negotiate it up front if you want the buyer to assume it."
Yeah, I have one case for Windows, and I told them that why your taxes are getting so high, and he said like, oh, because I put the Windows inside the taxes, and he said, well, you do that. It's like, well, he said, for how long? And he said, like, for 30 years. For 30 years, you will be paying your Windows? And yeah, it was like a whatever program, I don't remember. So we put the house on the market. The house was under contract. And one of the clauses of the loan it was that there have to be paid off at closing. To pay off that was part of the equity. They have to put money to close. So it's like so you are tied for this for the next 30 years. And they absolutely didn't understand what they were saying. They said that it will be a sign. I said, why I'm selling the house? They will be enjoying the windows. And they, yeah, but you have the decision to install it.
Right.
So it created a lot of confusion. Of course, the house was out of the market and the contract failed. And they will stay in the house, I don't know, forever right now until they find out how to pay off that. And I have two more for the roof, which it is a decision to have more green and in saving money, but really they don't understand, or they don't read, or they assume. That's maybe the exact word. If they sell the house, the buyer, the new owner, will be paying that also.
Right.
Oh, good. So I believe when I can read the contract, I will be calling you.
No problem, Jackie. I'm happy to help.
Learn more. But it's interesting that the way they minimize words, because sometimes when you read that paragraph so long, and then you go in the mirror like, what they try to say, I can do this or I cannot. And also a little thing that if we don't assign, or we don't decide if the assessment, if we don't put who gets the assessment, as we have to assume that the buyer will take after the closing and the seller will pay until the day of the closing.
That's correct.
Okay. Awesome. So I read. I try to read. So
Very good.
for me, understand the contract, give me basically the support for what I'm representing, the buyer and the seller. And I work with a lot of international. They more in some countries that they don't have, but when we have you as a closing agent attorney. And like I don't know in Venezuela right now, I don't know anything more in my country, but before we don't have that, the seller hold the money. It's more in a good faith more than in the legal way process, that somebody that doesn't have anything to do with the transaction will be the person who put everything together.
Right.
So understand that, understanding this now, for me, it's like okay, I have to have very clear. If I am in Miami or in Broward County, the buyer pay the title insurance. So if I'm working in Orlando and West Palm, so it's the seller. So
Seller.
now that they said that if it's not in the seller doesn't pay, when I put Miami Brevard, assume that buyer will be the responsible for the title insurance. That also help a lot to understand.
Yep.
So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Jackie. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I have your phone going, your office phone, not your personal phone,
I
going
see.
over
Thank you.
the banner. So I have some people in the, and I know more people will be looking at this live at the end of the day. So I put your phone. So
Thank you so much, Jackie. Happy to help anyone who needs any help and has any questions about anything. Thank you.
and I will be bother you later for talking about FERTA, which I'm fascinated with FERTA for so many years, and I know it is also good talk for the people to know what to do more when they are coming now, more to invest in Florida for short-term rentals and investment properties. So happy anniversary a little late also.
Thank you so much.
I know you have fun in Jamaica.
Had a
So,
great time. Thank you,
anything
Jackie.
else that you want to say?
I think we covered pretty much everything that I would normally have covered. So, if there's anybody has any questions, have them please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about FERPTA some more. So, we're good.
We are good. We are getting this. Okay. But thank you so much,
All
Danny.
right, my pleasure, Jackie. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Get out. Oh.